phenomena are what we experience. We don't talk about objects as they are in themselves, which physicists do. They talk about this world in space and time, that light travels through space, objects move in space and time, and that we are separate in space and time. Kant figured this out through the Critique of Pure Reason, and Einstein figured this out through physics about 200 years later. But the curious phenomenon is that space and time are not characteristics of the world outside of us. Space and time are something that we produce as a way of making sense of our experience, of whatever it is that's outside of us that comes to us through experience. We organize that in space and time, which our consciousness secretes. Kind of like the X and Y axis on a graph. You know, you put an X and Y axis on a graph so that you can plot data points. And then you can see, you know, is there a curve, or is what the relationship is? Are things increasing or things decreasing by using these axes? Space and time are the axes on which we organize our experience. So whatever is coming to us from outside of ourselves has to be presented for us to make sense of it. It has to be in space and time. And outside of space and time, we're not really capable of comprehending what that is. And everything that is outside of us is also outside of space and time. So, whereas an objective scientist will tell you that consciousness is just a byproduct of chemical reactions of atoms and molecules, a phenomenologist realizes that atoms and molecules are just a byproduct of consciousness. It's how we see the world. It's not how the world is, but it's how we see. That's what Kant's most famous quote, I think, is, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. So the world that we perceive is the world that we perceive. It makes sense to us because we organize it in space and time for our own experience, and that allows us to deal with it. And in space and time, we can find food, we can do all the things that we need to do to live, and we can develop objective science, which allows us to build complex machines that we can use in our lives. But it's not sufficient to explain the world around us or how we got here, and it's a ridiculous leap that it makes, that consciousness, that objective scientists would deny the reality of our own experience of consciousness in their dogma of explaining the world in terms of objects in space and time. They don't like to believe that there's anything beside objects in space and time. They would like to believe, even physicists who know relativity. I mean, Einstein tells us that there is no absolute space and time, that space and time are relative to how fast you're going. So, and it depends on your perspective. And he doesn't mean that, you're in he meant that very literally, that your perspective, the space and time that a perceiver generates, really is, it's yours. You're always at the center of it. You're here in the middle of it, and it expands out around you. And that's the nature of That's the nature of consciousness. And so consciousness precedes all of our experiments with objects in space and time. And physicists, most objective scientists, never study phenomenology. It's not part of the core curriculum of any science except nursing. Nurses are the only people in the medical profession who treat the whole person. Everybody else has a specialty, but nurses treat the whole person. So if you get a master's degree in nursing, you have to take phenomenology. And that's just about the only people who know about this. You can talk to most physicists, they have no idea what phenomenology is. Even though it's at the core of all sciences. Every scientist should have this understanding of how the world is put together. The world is not put together the way it appears to us. It appears to us this way in order that we can make sense of it, that we can interact with each other, that we can interact with the plants and animals around us, and that we can find our way to survive. Other animals may organize the world completely differently. Plants may see the world completely differently. And to see it is human-centric. Okay? What's going on out there and that has given rise to us is beyond our comprehension, which is an important thing to realize. And by not realizing that, objective scientists like to think that they can solve all of our problems with machines, with this philosophy of everything is made of objects in space and time. So much of the approach to mental health, right, is about, you have an imbalance in the chemistry in your brain, right? It may be that the brain of one person has, the chemical reactions that are going on in it are different from the chemical reactions going on in someone else. And that may in fact have some, it may correspond to a difference in behavior or a difference of attitude. But mostly it's a difference in behavior, which is what they're primarily looking at. But a phenomenologist would say there's probably more to it than that. The change in chemical reactions is likely the result of a difference in consciousness or a change in consciousness. For as much as we can talk about phenomenology in this short period of time, it's a different method of inquiry. It's a way of examining organisms that is not bogged down in objects in space and time and is not bogged down with the scientific method of always trying to isolate variables. And the one characteristic of the phenomenological method of inquiry is that the results are not quantifiable. You won't ever get an equation that tells you exactly what's going on. It's not going to be mathematical, but you can learn a lot about organisms through this method of inquiry. And this method of inquiry involves basically 3 stages. One of them is bracketing. Bracketing, referred to as in a mathematical equation. It's a section of the equation that you're not going to look at yet. There's an order to how you do an equation, and the part that's in the bracket, you can wait until you get to that part. You put what you believe or what you think is going on is what you bracket. That you want to suspend belief in whatever ideas that you have going into your phenomenological inquiry. Like your idea that the earth is, that consciousness is a byproduct of chemical reactions, and that vision is the result of light hitting your eye and being processed by the brain, going through your lens, hitting the retina, and then being carried by the optic nerve back into the brain, and then processed by the brain. All of that may be a representation of something else. There's a guy, Rupert Sheldrake, who objective scientists really love to hate, who has the idea that light doesn't come in through the eyes, but it goes out through the eyes. And that the experience that we see in the world is these are projections that come from inside, that perception is working in the opposite way, that our brains are interpreting the world and presenting it to us through our eyes, and that what we experience, how the world comes to us, is not from out here, but from within, and we present it that way. It's an open question. The thing about phenomenology is it reveals that we're not capable of understanding very much about how organisms work. That organisms are they're always more than the sum of their parts. So that's a critical thing. Organisms are always more than the sum of their parts. We are not machines. And medicine never tires of looking at us as machines. And for that reason, medicine is not getting very far scientifically. That's why there's so much left to know, so much left to learn about medicine and about ourselves and about each other, is because we are not machines, and we're used to treating ourselves as machines. Okay.
Does anybody have any? Yeah. You're looking at me like, does anybody have any comments, questions, or?
You gotta be kidding.
Okay.
First and foremost, the thing that comes to my mind is that if you're not selling shirts that say phenomenologist on it or something, it's obviously the coolest word ever.
Okay.
I mean, on a serious side though, the science and the theory of what if, this is phenomenologist to me, is like, what about this, You know, like DNA. DNA can be looked at scientifically, but there's so much more DNA that we don't know. And, you know, that's where you come in and say, well, what about this? Why is DNA affected by the tones? Why is DNA affected by light? Why is it affected by heat? You know, and everything that can be that we're I'm just discovering where did that come from? You know, so when you're blowing my brains out, that's why I'm going to need a hat that says
Right.
They may be blown away even more, though, when you hear the three different styles of music and how tone actually impacts us. Right? Like with the three different styles of didgeridoo music that you're going to offer us today.
Yeah, there are many different styles of didgeridoo music. I'm happy to play didgeridoo music for you. And I listen to music as a phenomenologist. I'm interested in how does it affect us and what is its relation to human culture. Like, why is it that music affects us in the way that it does? All these things are very interesting to me. And I hope that if you get nothing else out of this, that when you're dealing with objective scientists who are so married to materialism, that who don't recognize that space and time are not absolute, and they're not something that's a characteristic of the world outside of us, but they are a characteristic of how we organize the world. And understand that organisms are not going to be comprehended according to objective science. They can find some things. There are some things that they can, the field of microbiology and biomechanics right? Your arm, there are some mechanical aspects to how your arm works, but your control over your arm is not at all like a machine. You're not, a robot moves, it has very calculated motions to do what it's going to do. People, like, I'm talking with my hands. There's no reason for me to move my hands when I'm talking to you like this. But it's part of the expression of what I'm telling you, right? That it's part of the corporeal expression of what I'm saying. A robot would have no need to do that. A robot would just stand here with its arms at its side, and it wouldn't move any other part of its body except the part that was necessary to make the sounds that you would understand. And there is a long tradition of science, of phenomenological science, that explores this difference in the difference between objective science and phenomenology. And the philosophy that comes out of phenomenology is called existentialism, where the experience, what we're experiencing, is primary. That the idea that we're just one small speck on a great giant universe. No, you're here at the center of the universe of your own experience. And the miracle of communicating with other people and other organisms is inexplicable. It moves very quickly. Anything that has anything to do with organisms moves very quickly into a realm that objective science just can't do anything with, and never will. So when objective scientists tell you that they know what's going on in the world, and they tell you that they know how your body operates, and that there's that you're just a pile of atoms, and that your consciousness is just a byproduct of these chemical reactions, you should understand that that's due to their very limited background in science. Please. Pardon me? The hard problem of consciousness? Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Right.
And then it becomes an issue of, well, we somehow, it's so small, and you can divide it, so you never found it's but it's somehow conscious, and that's what they're trying to solve for, but you want something that it's like, it's too access in one place.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes, that is exactly the problem. That is exactly it.
And I think that the real question, you agree, is how does matter realize how consciousness, right? And there's evidence for it, the observer effect.
Right.
Which was, I forget what the experiment was officially called, but basically the result of it was just having someone observe the experiment changed matter fundamentally.
Yeah.
So there is a connection.
Right. Yeah. There are lots of experiments, but Schrodinger's cat is, I think, is one example. But yeah, there's an experiment with light going through a slit. That if it's observed, it'll come out one way. If it's not observed, it'll come out another way. And that's a very curious thing. It should give objective scientists pause. But I think that's probably about as far as we're going to get with phenomenology. If there's any questions,
Are you ready to hear John play? Is that to feel okay to everyone to hear him play? So if you want to, there are going to be 3 different parts, and John will tell you about it. The first one is going to be drone didgeridoo. The second one is going to be more ecstatic type dance didgeridoo, something that he would be playing more dance style music. And the third one will be more like what you'd experience in a sound bath. All 3 of them would be what he was saying about your experience and how you experience. So I wanted to welcome you to sit on the floor, or lay on the floor if you want to do that, or sit in a chair, whatever's most comfortable for you. And do whatever feels best to you. And maybe dim the lights whoever's down in the back there. Pardon me? Yeah, no, yeah, thanks. Does that feel okay to you?
Yeah, I know.
And